Welcome back to the channel, folks. I am Matt. Hope you're all doing well. A little bit different format today compared to most of my videos, but I think you guys might like this one. Now, let me give you a backstory here. Now, as a side gig, I make content for a company called FA Distro in Canada, Flavor Art Distro. If you're a retailer in Canada, definitely check them out. I make a lot of content that's advocacy related, more tutorial related for vape shops, training, stuff like that, troubleshooting, content that's more geared towards vape retailers as opposed to consumers. But I have done a few interviews that have been really interesting, and I think even consumers would find them very, very informational and helpful. So what I'm going to show you today is an interview that I did with a guy named Darryl Tempest. Now, he is from Canadian Vapor Association, super knowledgeable, awesome dude, really knows his stuff. And while this interview is mostly Canadian-centric, we do talk about, the global macro viewpoint of vape. It's not all doom and gloom, even though there's some bad stuff going on, especially in the US. And it's worth talking about, what's going on in other countries, because that can help shape the global opinion on vapor products. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into the interview. Darryl, thanks so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. I know you're a busy man.
No, well, thanks for having me, Matt, and thanks to all your listeners and viewers that keep engaged on these issues.
Well, obviously, like most of the viewers probably already know who you are and what you do. Just for those few that might not, why don't you give people your, a quick background story and what your job description is at CVA?
Yeah, so I've been politically active for a long time, 26 years. It's my birthday today, actually.
Oh, happy birthday.
Yeah, so it would be 26 years. And on leaderships, elections, working with different government officials within their capacity. It's been an incredible journey and a real privilege. That led me to the CVA. I actually came from the cannabis industry here in Canada, from the medical side. And then this seemed like a really natural fit. So I've been with the CVA, or the Canadian Vaping Association, since late 2015. So currently I hold several titles, but the main portion of my job is advocacy. So I'm the registered lobbyist both federally and provincially. So I deal with the federal government and all the provincial governments as it relates to vaping regulation. In addition, I run the communications team. So we've had an extremely strong year with communications. I think we communicate more than anyone on the globe as it relates to vaping policy and the science and research that's available to all of us throughout the world.
Can you dive a little bit deeper into what your current lobbying efforts are and some of the recent successes that you've had with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we had heard in advance as an industry that the federal government was contemplating a flavor ban. And it was a real point of coming together in the Canadian industry. We got support from all kinds of retailers, manufacturers, and distributors coming together on a real succinct strategy. So that strategy really has three prongs. The first prong being communication, which we started thanks to the gift of Ali. We really needed to learn how to communicate stronger, especially with elected officials. The second prong is legal defense. We've raised almost $1.4 million to defend the industry here in Canada. And I'll get into how not only does that position with legal defense, but also with government outreach. The third prong was government outreach. So in last year, in 2021, we met with, on the federal level, 1/3 of every elected official in the country. We also led the nation in communications. We were second in communications, and we led in total MP engagement. Wow. As it relates to individuals and to an organization.
That's awesome. So let's dive a little bit deeper into the flavor ban, because I think a lot of the retailers out there, obviously that's what's at top of mind and what scares them the most. What are the updates on that, and where do you think we are with that whole process?
Well, and I'm glad you used the word process, because it really is a process. And how it looks is that Health Canada, in its current format of the legislation in Canada under the TVPA, or the Tobacco, Vaping and Product Act here in our nation, um, uh, the bureaucrats have the right to make any regulations that they wish under its current design. So, but what's interesting about the legislation itself is that it's due for review. So what happens is it goes to our Standing Committee of Health, which in Canada is called HESA, and they review the legislation and the regulations and how they interact with each other, and also the consequences or unintended consequences of those regulations. So the HESA committee has standing members and then a lot of associate members who are also involved on the file. From those standing members, they will put back recommendations to both the minister of the day, Duclos, and also to, and it will flow from there to the bureaucrats. So what happened was every regulation that we've gotten in Canada was rammed through very quickly, sometimes in 90 and 120-day increments. The Gazette 1 process, so how a regulation happens in Canada is they do something called the Gazette 1, which is the bureaucracy gives its intention of what regulations they're going to put through. Then they go through a consultation process for communities and industry leaders to give their feedback on those regulations. And then they put through something called Gazette 2. Gazette 2 is the implementation of the regulations as they have formed them. When it came to the flavor ban, there was so much pushback from the community, from consumers. We had a consumer program that was led by industry leaders, not by industry, called tobaccokills.ca, which had well over 100,000 consumers, which would be 10% of the total consumers in this market, that emailed their MPs and said, don't do this. This will impact my quality of life. So from there, that was the first step. And then you saw the retailers, the manufacturers come together, and we did a massive outreach to the MPs, and with special focus on the standing committee members. So now we've met with almost all the members. What I found interesting, and I'll be at close to 130 meetings already since we really jumped into the process in June. So that's between June and now.
Wow.
And in those meetings, it was very surprising to me that the information about vaping didn't get in to their mindset for the most part, but neither did the misinformation. That was a real paradigm shift for me, where I just assumed I was going to get, I'll be informal on this, my head kicked in, that we're targeting youth and that we're...
yeah, they bombard you with all the talking points that the antennas have.
Yep. The biggest paradigm shift for me is they didn't. Their knowledge was so small, and their engagement was so limited on this file that it created this massive opportunity. So in those 130 meetings, I've gotten really a lot of pushback from 2 MPs. So 2 of 130 were like, no, I'm against this. This is wrong. You're targeting youth. Everyone else that we've talked to really understood the points that we were making as to, and what I've challenged the bureaucracy on is that we can't call them unintended consequences anymore. If you look at how much Canada has communicated, the UK has communicated, the US, France, New Zealand, you can't say that they're unattended in terms of, and these are the key points. 1, people returning to smoking, which is effective. 2, the impact on small business. So in Nova Scotia, which was an early adopter of flavor bans here in Canada, over 80% of the businesses went out of business within 90 days of the flavor ban. So that
you have a good test case to point towards.
Well, it's not even a test case. Now it's just fact. What else is interesting about the return to smoking rates, and we know this from taxation in Nova Scotia, that their tax on tax received on combustible tobacco went up 5.6% in that same period of time.
Wow.
So now we can bring real market data to the decision makers and to say, no one can say that these consequences are unattended or that anyone was misinformed, because we're going through the process of making sure that you are informed, specifically the members of the committee. The next one, and this one, Matt, I don't know if we ever talked about this, but I'm the lucky father of 4, and all of my kids are 9 and under.
Sounds like a lot of work.
Yeah, it is.
I have 2 and I can barely handle it.
Yeah, thank God I have a patient wife. The black market is a massive concern, and we've seen a large spike in those provinces that have instituted a flavor ban. And so we're saying to the regulators, don't talk to me about your fear of a valley, because these regulations create the perfect environment for a valley type event.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you should see the impact that has. So the first and foremost is that Canada has 4 pillars of which the society is built within our constitution and the way that the system is designed. Harm reduction is one of those pillars. So if we embrace harm reduction and we have fentanyl and we have safe injection sites, and we're even talking about, as a nation, decriminalizing hard drugs, and we're going to, I'm sorry, ban flavors.
Yeah,
it just doesn't fit with the context. The reason I go through this is we all know the hypocrisy. And the last one that I'll cover, and then I'll circle around of what the impact has been. In Canada, youth experimentation with alcohol is twice that of vaping and cannabis, twice that in our nation. Yet there's birthday flavored vodka, spirits, anything you want. So what I ask the members is, if we get rid of coolers, does the problem suddenly go away? So the foundation of this very simplistic answer from the anti-groups has nothing to do with actual policy that will address the issue that they're trying to address, including the fact that Nova Scotia, a year after their flavor ban, has come out with zero data on impact on youth usage after they ban flavors. So people are modeling after this market, yet this market is not saying whether it had any impact or not. The reason I go through this is because when you have those one-on-one conversations with lawmakers, they're really getting it. Because the key is, this is a complex file. It has great value to society, and that it is not being regulated properly, and that the anti-groups have given you no solutions through their lobbying. But I go back to my initial point is, we hear a lot from heart and stroke and cancer and lung, but what I haven't seen is a lot of their impact on those who make the laws for us. So they're not listening to either message.
Interesting.
Which very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, in the U.S., I'm 50 miles on the other side of the Canadian border. There is more impact, and maybe it's just because our lobbying laws are different, and they're but it's like some of these congressmen and senators and stuff will just read off of what these heart and lung groups and whatever other body parts groups are giving them, and it's their buddy for sure. So it's good to hear that up there there's a little more separation.
Well, there seems that, and I think that we made a very conscious choice at the CVA. We made heavy investments in communication first, and that was a way for us. And if you look at it, it wasn't paid communication. If you Google vaping, we have to get through 6 pages of our own releases and information that we put out in the market before we can get to the global stuff. And that happened organically, because I'm paid Facebook and Twitter and stuff like that.
Yeah.
You actually dig down to it, you can take it out fairly easily. So it shows that consistency and organic analytics are extremely important. So we knew that the mass media was not going to cover us, and was certainly not going to cover us fairly. I mean, you could tell by CNN's report on that last vaping is not effective for getting people off of smoking.
Yeah.
That was everywhere. It was absolutely everywhere. So in order to combat that, you have to be consistent. So that's rather than going to mass media. The second thing that the CVA really concentrated on was through legal. And the reason that legal is important is it actually has twofold. One is certainly the defense of that province when it comes to their right. And we've made sure to communicate often and consistently with the Attorney General that we don't feel that they have a constitutional right to ban flavors, to destroy these businesses, and to get people back to smoking. But we had a ton of experts that came both within Canada and globally that did their affidavits within that province. Now I'm able to share those affidavits with the federal government to show the strength of the argument. So one of the things, and I really want to go into the meetings a bit, because it's not just about the 30 minutes or the hour that you're with the member. It is the 5 to 10 hours that you spend in prep and sending them information in advance for context. And it is the hours of very specific responses that we send to that member. So for example, we got 2 reports that were very anti-vaping. There was probably 150 pages. We broke down those 2 reports for the member and did the counter to every single point in there. And I don't think that that's a step that a lot of regular lobbyists would take.
Yeah, it's a lot of work for sure.
Very individualized, very individualized. But when we started, and I know you're going to giggle, but it was actually a great opportunity. I heard about things like popcorn lung. So every time I got popcorn lung, it was a thumbs up, and I'd even say to the member, "Oh, I'm going to smash that one. Don't,
yeah, you know, that's the low hanging. That's the low hanging fruit at this point."
Absolutely. Where the weakness is, and I challenge government on this one, is that there isn't as much research on flavors being critical for adoption as there is on efficacy of vaping being far less harmful than smoking. But it should be government looking at this because it's their opportunity to address our largest form of preventable death. So the CVA is really, really focused on calling out that hypocrisy, but in a very professional way. So we're giving them the path, and we're showing that this complex file is probably one of their greatest opportunities to leave a legacy. And remember, the members are like most of society. Some smoke, some did smoke, but I haven't talked to a member yet that hasn't said, well, you know, my brother-in-law quit smoking because of vaping. Or
even like when the anti types, you know, some Democrats that I've talked to down here, like they'll still admit, you know, just so you know, my mom quit smoking with vaping, but I still have concerns. You know, it's like, how much freaking, you know, anecdotal proof do you need? It's like, it's at this point, it's affected just about anyone's life. Somebody knows someone that's quit smoking with vaping, and yet they're still, you know, putting their head in the sand.
Well, I think that doing those one-on-one meetings, you understand what to get to them. So, for example, one member was very interested in lung. So when I sent him the COPD results, they responded back. And that's when you know you have the engagement. Anyone can say, hey, I'm with you, I'm on your side. And then 10 minutes later, it's like, oh man, I wish I wasn't on that meeting. But when you see the emails coming back, do you have anything else on improvement of lung conditions? What other doctors do you have? Another one was, I talked about the UK questioning their role in the World Health Organization. I had a member say, there's no chance that the UK said that. Now I get that chance to send them that information, that link. It's all sourced. And the way that it's structured well for the members is that we do it like in paragraph and link, so that you have your source, you have one paragraph with the main point, and then we really put the depth into what their questions are. So it's been very effective, because you're not only talking to the member themselves, but chances are staff is doing most of the work, as you would know for sure. So you need to make it in a digestible way for the policy teams within those offices to be able to get the points that you're saying, get our counterpoints to anything that they've been given, And we've seen even in the tobacco-free week, normally that's heart and stroke and lung and cancer's chance to take swings at vaping all day long. None of those organizations brought up vaping in the tobacco reduction week. Not one.
Interesting. So now, as far as, Gazette One came out, what was it? Beginning of last summer or spring?
Yeah, it was Gazette One came out in the middle of the election, which was very very interesting timing. So that would have been during August, September.
Oh, okay. And so Gazette 2 is what, at minimum 90 days after that, or is it 180 days? I forget.
It's not set like a process like that, and that's
Well,
why we find this.
I know there wasn't there like a minimum time frame though, or something, or they could just come out with it at any point.
Theoretically they could come out with it at any point. What they have to do is they have to actually go through the consultations. So, for example, if they didn't receive any consultations or no feedback, then they would say, okay, we're going to move forward with the regs. They received, I believe it was 26,000 consultations.
Wow.
So I think, but it comes back to how you led in terms of process.
Yeah.
Health Canada has to review the TVPA. Our engagement with the Standing Committee of Health has been early and often. So we're ahead of everyone, including Health Canada. We know the facts are on our side. So I'm challenging the body orgs and Health Canada to their risk assessments. I'm challenging. I had one MP that asked me two very salient questions. The first question that they asked, and this is a HESA committee member. The first question they asked is, why isn't there a pathway for adults and then another one to deal with youth experimentation? I said, what a great question for Health Canada.
Yeah.
Why are adults not even considered through this process? And the second question that they asked me was, as it relates to relative risks, why can you present me with all these relative risks or all this relative risk data, and I'm not hearing that in our marketplace? So what Health Canada did is they said that they would do the approved statements on relative risk and then never did them. So I said, remember, like, I can't even talk to the general community up here in Canada about relative risk. So they have a completely different perception on vaping, and it's counter to public health in a massive way. And you can see how those messages mean a lot to a policymaker and to a legislature, because that is within their preview. So this will be the first time since the TVPA was enacted that parliamentarians get to review and have a say in the future of vaping in this country, and hence why the CDA has led in lobbying. Now is their time, and it's holding them accountable to making sure that they understand the file and the impact on 4.5 million Canadians in a nation that has 40 million people.
So could this be a situation where, Health Canada just tables the whole thing, like, hey, we got 26,000 people we got to respond to, all these different hoops we got to jump through? Like, could they potentially just say, screw it, we're not going to mess with this right now?
I think take it one step further.
And now, obviously, I know you don't want to give anybody any false hopes or say any absolutes. I'm just playing out how this could go down.
Yeah, it's just an educated opinion or an educated guess. One of those two things. I think if you would look at it from where the TVPA was when it started to now, I think they need direction. And the direction that they've been given is youth, 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 right? That's been the direction of the world, with the exception of a couple of countries. But the real goal of heart and stroke, cancer, lung, Health Canada, parliamentarians, and our industry is the same, is to get people off of smoking. That is the goal. This isn't a fight between NRTs and vaping. This is whatever works for you. Use that, as it's killing millions and it's costing billions. So the mandate under the TVPA is what needs to be addressed. And why I go through that experiment is with the support of parliament, or with members of parliament, we have an opportunity to fix the house, not a short-term solution, because as you know, it's more than just flavors that make this industry thrive. It's education, right, of the populace, most smokers. It's taxation, and sensible taxation, because if you tax this product like combustible tobacco, you're not going to get the adoption rates that you're looking for that address the two main factors, which are people are smoking, and it's costing us billions in healthcare costs. So making better definitions in the TVPA of what the goals of regulating vaping are. And then the last is how to address the black market. The argument on legalizing cannabis in Canada was based on the premise that they wanted to take it away from criminals.
Yeah.
That was the basis of it.
Yeah.
It wasn't anything else. So the basis on vaping has two massive appeals. First being harm reduction, which is one of the four pillars of our society. And two being keeping it out of the hands of criminals, because criminals don't ask for ID. Right. Yeah. And none of that is reflected. So like if you look at the Gazette one, and this is where I believe Health Canada has a lot of problems, is their answer to the black market was they were going to observe it. What are they going to observe? People going to the hospital? How do you observe criminal activity? So I think they know they have a problem. I don't think that they ever thought that we were going to get as active and be as effective as the industry was, as the CVA pushed forward on and made hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of investment to make sure that we could be this effective. I think we caught the agency flat-footed. And now the way I describe it is coming through to early last year, all the walls were built around us and we as an industry, and we've ripped those walls apart and rebuilt them around Health Canada, asking some very important questions. And those questions are now being asked by members of parliament.
So let me know if I'm understanding you correctly. With this whole process, it could potentially, give you a chance to potentially reshape the regulations, help Health Canada save face, not do a blanket flavor ban, but maybe with this whole process, you could kind of shape some of the other regulations so it looks like they're doing something, and they'll probably be more effective than a flavor ban anyway, and it will be more favorable for the industry. Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Yeah, it'll be more, it will allow us to continue to grow and thrive. To make sure, and that's an important message for everyone, is that this is our opportunity to grow. We have 1.1 or 1.2 million vapors estimated in the country. We need 2 million, 2.5. We should look more like the UK does. And also it gives support to Health Canada to be able to widen their mandate and include consumers and addressing smoking far more in their regulatory pathway. Because again, and I can get into, there's a lot of drivers, as you know, to youth experimentation. But the key drivers are mental health. So from that perspective, we need to look at why kids experiment across the board, obviously. And that's, I think, where the point is. But in the risk assessments, adults are not considered, which means parliamentarians and the minister of the day have to make sure that Health Canada gets that directive from that level to say that adults matter, your life matters. So that's the support that we will make sure that Health Canada has, so they can get the regulations right and help this industry grow and help Canadians get off smoking. So,
I mean, this whole process is something that could take quite some time then. Yeah. So people probably shouldn't be expecting to see any answer from Health Canada next week or probably even next month on something like this.
I would highly suggest, I find it unlikely that a flavor ban or a Gazette 2 will be coming out anytime soon. In addition, I think elongating the process is in our best interest.
Yeah, I agree.
And the reason I say that is not only because of the misinformation, but not everything is a fight. sometimes just pure education. And again, that's what I said was that paradigm shift, is that I got a chance to relax the messaging on defend, 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 and start building a strong narrative around what could be. And that's always strong in terms of what you hear from politicians is they're kind of future looking, right? Like they're always talking about this is for the next generation and so forth. So it's more aligned with their goals. So we're aligning a lot of our narrative with their goals while still holding the hypocrisy accountable. So for example, one of the ones that's been effective is we have warning labels all over our products, but the alcohol industry doesn't. There's nowhere, my uncle died of throat cancer because of heavy alcohol use, but nowhere do I see on a single bottle in this country, this product could cause cancer, even though it absolutely can.
Yeah.
So using those common sense approaches has helped with has helped us get that messaging through about the true complexity of it. So if a consumer or a retailer gets a chance to talk to a politician, I hope some of these talking points really help, because they tend to be the ones that they could grasp. If we start talking about toxicology, which is a really important point, toxicology is meant for HESA.
Yeah, it's super interesting, but you can get stuck in the weeds quick if you.
And you're going to not put them to sleep, but unless you're a trained chemist, what do you actually know?
Yeah.
Right. So, but these common sense ones have been super successful, and I think, and a big shout out to CAMH up in Canada, which is Center for Mental Health and Addiction. They did a phenomenal affidavit for us in New Brunswick, and they are digging into this issue, and they are the foremost body. It's the one that the politicians listen to. And, early on in our process, there wasn't a lot of engagement from CAMH. Getting those other stakeholders and those partners is critical. So
it's a big deal. And it's something we've been working on, trying harder at in the States the last few years, but it's difficult. And, unfortunately, even with some of these harm reduction groups in the States, you have some intertwining of like Bloomberg money where these groups that are for harm reduction, but then there's also spending millions to ban vapes in various third world countries and shit, so there's a web of money down here, and it's very hard to break through and kind of get under the umbrella of the other harm reduction organizations here.
Well, and I know Smoke Free Kids got what, like 150 or 160 million dollars. But then when I look at the impacts, again, so much of it is spent on communicating at such a high level that the filtering down isn't having as much impact, I think. Which is sad, because I think if you used $150 million to really focus on kids smoking, that is a very honorable position.
Sure.
So one of the things that I kind of call out on Bloomberg for sure is you spent $1 billion. Wouldn't you wanted to spend $1 billion on cancer research, on heart disease and lung? Like that $1 billion could have been really put to use.
For sure.
Because most of the studies, and I'll end on this section on this, so much of their analysis is predicated on gateway. Like I read studies like they're going out of style. I had to download an app so I can double my reading speed. That's how much I have to read.
Yeah.
And I see the predication of gateway throughout all of their analysis without any sub-analysis that actually shows where they got the gateway data from. So from a gateway perspective, I love talking gateway when it comes to politicians and those who make.
You're probably used to it too, because from cannabis, because that was a big, fear mongering talking point back then too.
It went straight from cannabis to heroin. It was like, well, why? So it's a very natural progression of the conversation, and it's in our wheelhouse. So we're able to address popcorn lung and gateway very effectively. And when we make those effective arguments, our other hypocrisy arguments start to filter in, because there is, what study do you refer to that says that why shouldn't every alcohol container have this product may cause cancer throughout the world? There's a good argument to be there, but no one's beating that drum.
Yeah. Now, do you think, and I could be way off base here, but could the current political climate in Canada with, the protests there and things of that nature potentially kind of take away the appetite from the government to like, okay, look, we don't want to ban anything else right now. We don't want to deal with, any more drama. I'm just, obviously I have a US brain and with our politics, but, do you think that there could be any, I'm not saying like crossover, like they're the same group as vapors, but just, the kind of freedom types, do you think because they're standing up now in Canada and protesting that maybe that could have an effect on the flavor ban?
I wouldn't make it as granular as just the flavor ban in
Just,
our little,
freedom in general, I guess.
but I think in general, the files, the millions of files, because you got to remember, HESA, which is the Standing Committee of Health, they got a lot on the go with COVID, period.
Yeah.
Like forget the protests and everything else. It's that would take a lot of the committee's time. So if you look at health is the #1 expenditure in Canada because of our publicly funded healthcare system. Therefore, so much would go through that committee where you almost need two committees, one on anything that's not COVID and one that's COVID. I know one party had suggested that, and it actually made some sense to me, so that you can keep everything moving. So right now, I would answer your question by saying it's kind of gridlock because you have these two massive issues. How do you restart our country? And where does investment need to be made to restart our country? And apparently there's a couple of trucks up in front of Parliament Hill causing a lot of distraction and challenges within the House as you watch the parties debate on how they should be dealing with both reopening the country and dealing with the protests. Mm-hmm. So it comes back to our premise that we said, not only do I think it lengthens out the review on the vaping file, I think it probably elongates the like hundreds of files, if not thousands of files across the country.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I think we covered a lot of the questions I was going to ask you, because I was going to ask you about arguments that you're using. What are your best approaches to politicians? But you kind of covered most of that already. I guess, more of a looking at it through a macro lens, where do you think we are with the state of vape in Canada and globally? And I'll give my opinion after yours as well, because I feel like we're kind of could be potentially at some turning point. But what do you think?
I would agree with that fundamentally. I think we're at a massive tipping point. I think the pressure of the first blast of a valley has subsided.
Yeah.
That's been a major change difference. The news cycle out of the US is still quite disastrous. So most of the negative articles and information really do come out of the US and then so that's something that is a challenge and has to be addressed. But I think overall, if you look at it from a Canadian perspective and then a global perspective, you're definitely seeing the impacts in Canada in terms of if Health Canada had gone through a flavor ban a year ago, it would have gone through and we would be in court. Our ability to do the outreach that we have had through the association, I believe, has had a massive impact on being able to get the right information to the people, because bureaucrats, you can have consumers call them 10,000 times, but you get 100 or 120 MPs calling Health Canada. That's a completely different narrative and something that they haven't gone through. And that doesn't happen a lot. So, you can only get that sort of massive action if you're a big energy project, something that impacts hundreds of thousands of jobs or thousands of jobs, or in our case, millions of lives. So that's where you'll see that vaping will have that opportunity globally because of the impact it has on so many people across the globe. And I believe what many say when it comes to the Cochrane Report, which is my favorite overall report of all, that the debate on vaping is done. There is no more debate. So let's move on with policies that do make sense. In terms of marketing and how we want the industry positioned, because we want to be able to communicate with adults. And frankly, as a dad of 4, I'm going to talk to my kids about vaping. But I'll talk to them about alcohol, and I'll talk to them about cannabis, and I'll talk to them about the other choices that they're going to face in life. But exposure is not something that, I think that we'll get to in terms of broad base. I think marketing will be the one that will always kind of stick in the politician's mind, because in their mind, we're on Twitter, TikTok, and Facebook going after their kids 24/7, right? That's the one that we have to really work around. We get that one settled. I think the rest really falls into place.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've, just over the last couple of years, I've definitely noticed more and more, doctors, scientists, well-respected folks coming out of the woodwork that have spoken up on this issue. And, just even the responses from the anti-type groups have been different. They seem a little more desperate. You see the Truth Initiative starting to talk about harm reduction as well, because they're almost trying to co-opt it from us, and even though they won't say vaping's harm reduction, but they'll start talking about harm reduction more, like I think that they're concerned that we have the high road, because we do, and so I think obviously we're not out of the woods whatsoever, but I do feel like we're in a lot better spot than we were in 2019, even right before EVALI. I think we're in a better spot as far as understanding goes. EVALI was horrible, and it spread a lot of misinformation, but it also perked up the ears of many, doctors, scientists, and researchers that got more interested in the subject just because of it. And then they kind of went down the rabbit hole and realized how helpful these products can be for smokers.
And the last piece, and I think that this is important, I don't know if you've talked about it a lot, but I think I'm going to start socializing more, is that the opportunity through COP9 is what really going to bust this open. Because one of the comments I say quite often, and this was coined about 3 years ago, at least in Canada, was that the science is catching up to vaping. And in those 4 short years from the start of S5, which this bill started in the Senate, not in the House, through S5 through to now, I cannot believe how much farther we're ahead on analysis, nicotine reduction experts, the 100 letters to the WHO, the 15 letters to the CDC and the FDA, of heavy hitters.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, John Britton, for example, his response to that vaping is not effective. I mean, we don't even have to say anything anymore. And what's changed too is experts like John are now in the media cycle. So they didn't answer 2 weeks later so that you couldn't get the pickup. They're answering within the day, which allows advocacy groups like CVA in Canada or SAFADA in the United States to be able to react in real time with those experts' words. And they are forever grateful to those people.
So last question here. Now, obviously, no one that owns their own business likes uncertainty, but especially small businesses where they're on a shoestring budget and whatnot. What do you say to some of those folks that are, scared? Maybe they're considering shutting their vape shop down or just not ordering any new product or whatever because of uncertainty, thinking that this flavor ban could come down at any time. Because in the US, when in 2016, when we had the deeming rule, the fear and uncertainty hurt the industry more than the actual regulation itself.
I would agree. I would say prepare for expansion for sure. It's gone too far now to just be impacted like the other regulations. And I would say that on threefold. One, there hasn't been any action yet. Two, the negative impacts, government would be held accountable to now, not just the bureaucracy, but government. They've been informed. This message is getting out there. And I think three, at least within the Canadian context, is the depth of which we prepared in New Brunswick to take this challenge. We have a phenomenal pathway to the Supreme Court. You get a Supreme Court win, that kills a potential for a federal favor ban.
Oh, for sure.
I would say do two things, right? The first is invest in your business, grow in your business, because the better you do, and help with the MP meetings, please. If you haven't, I need all the Canadian retailers to contact us to make sure that we can set those meetings for you so we can continue this pathway forward. But definitely invest in your business. And because when we tell MPs that every store has 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 consumers, that's a lot of ex-smokers in their community, and it means something to them. And then the second piece is, if you look at how we're defending the industry in New Brunswick, we're fighting right down to the fines. So if you get the fine is like $400 for selling a flavor, and we'll see you in provincial court. And you got constitutional experts, you got a national association behind you. You have all this strength, and that's why we need members, and we need everyone's support on legal defense. So the better you do, the more money we'll have to defend the industry, and then we'll be able to continue both pillars upwards. Because I believe what you do, that we were so fractured in 2019. We were the ones who got caught flat-footed, right? We just weren't organized to deal with that size of onslaught. We are all designed now to deal with an onslaught at any level, because we already did the grassroots well, I would say. But now we've taken it to a national level. So now, like the CVA is prepared to fight at a local level. We're right now, we're even in it with a couple of bylaw officers in different provinces. Like, we're getting down to those types of granular specifics, because we understand how all the pieces work. Because if I talk to an enforcement officer, I get to talk to the Minister of Finance in that province to say, hey, these guys aren't paying their taxes as you set out, so your program isn't working. So I can hold the accountability and get the information from the enforcement officer. So all of these pieces fit together. So I say, you know what, let's continue to investment and making sure our businesses grow. And of course, if anyone wants to ask me any questions, I'm 24/7. You can call me. I give you my cell phone and my email.
Well, I think things seem promising up there. Shoot, I might even come up and open up a vape shop if other people are going to shut theirs down. No, I'm kidding. Thanks so much, man. I think you laid it out well, and it was definitely interesting. I learned something new, so I'm sure other folks are going to be learning a lot from this as well. I appreciate it, and hopefully we could do this again in 4, 5, 6 months.
Yeah, plan on May.
Okay.
Tell Sean, because I think May is going to be a massive month. The way I would do it is I would do it early May, and the petition is going to be read in May.
Perfect.
With the 11,000 signatures. So I'll keep you looped in. Okay, dude?
All right, man. Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
All right, brother. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.